Gaza and Lebanon are engulfed in escalating violence, with rising casualties and a deepening humanitarian crisis. Airstrikes and retaliatory actions intensify, edging the region towards a dangerous tipping point as the world watches for sign of broader conflict. With the US presidential election just days away, Harris and Trump are in a dead heat. Both campaigns are battling for swing state support, with voter dynamics and last-minute efforts set to decide the outcome. Welcome to In Depth. Right, welcome back to In Focus. And as violence continues to surge in the Middle East, the escalating hostilities in Gaza and Lebanon have created significant humanitarian and security challenges. The conflict has led to significant casualties, with international calls for a ceasefire growing louder. The New York Times has reported that Israel's recent strike on Iranian military installations represents a major escalation in the ongoing conflict, marking the first publicly acknowledged operation inside Iran. Although the attack did not provoke an immediate Iranian response, it signifies a shift from covert operations to open confrontations, albeit a measured one for now. Iran has sought to downplay the strike's significance, signaling a preference for maintaining internal stability. However, tensions remain high, especially with Iranian proxies such as Hamas and Hezbollah involved in the broader regional conflict. Looking ahead, the US presidential election could influence the situation, potentially emboldening Israel to take further action against Iran. Right, welcome back. And to discuss the implications and potential for a broader regional conflict, we're joined by Dr. Wissam Yassin, a researcher in international relations from Beirut. Dr. Yassin, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Dr. Yassin, thank you for being here. With the ongoing escalation in Gaza, including the recent devastating airstrikes on Khan Yunis, how is this affecting the political and security landscape in Lebanon? And are we witnessing a shift in the dynamics along the border?
Well, there is no doubt that Benjamin Netanyahu is still, apparently, is determined to proceed with what he started. But the prices that he is paying now, I think, will force him to rethink his options. Because despite what he's done, he has killed Sinwar in Gaza and a set of leaders, on top of which is Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. And the Israelis in southern Lebanon, to be specific, is paying a heavy toll. In the past 24 hours, there were 61 IDF soldiers were injured from Golani and Igos and other elite troops. So in short, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government still cannot find an exit strategy from Gaza, and consequently they will not succeed in southern Lebanon because of the difficult terrain, the mountains, the caves, and also for the experienced fighters in Lebanon which differ from those in Gaza, so he will pay probably a heavier price in southern Lebanon, knowing that the Israeli forces will not endlessly fight.
Now, there has been significant military activity along the Israeli-Lebanon border since the conflict began. Do you think there is a growing risk of Lebanon being drawn directly into the Gaza conflict, and how might this affect the broader resistance movements in the region?
Lebanon already is taking part in the struggle of Gaza since October 7th. But what's happening now is that from being involved indirectly in Gaza to being directly involved in southern Lebanon. What happened is that Israel has assassinated many leaders, on top of which is Hassan Nasrallah, and carried out airstrikes and thought that they have destroyed the bunkers which hold the armament of Hezbollah. So they thought that they could proceed on land and occupy a land strip in order to negotiate. But what happened is that despite all these airstrikes, Hezbollah have taken the initiative and reorganized their cards, and now they are fighting on land. And the Israelis are now talking after the start of the land operation, that they're talking now about 1,000 soldiers that are killed or injured. And on the other hand, the Israelis couldn't even take hold of a single village in southern Lebanon. They are afraid to proceed because heavy machinery will be countered by fighters and anti-tank missiles. And on the other hand, the Israelis also cannot use infantry in large numbers because this will make them suffer from heavy casualties because of the drones and the snipers. And at the same time, they cannot even proceed with a fewer number of infantry because they will be captured. But whatever the case is, southern Lebanon is paying heavily for what's happening, and they have no choice but to yield and to adapt negotiations.
Mr. Yassin, the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to worsen under the blockade. And now we are seeing the effects spill over into Lebanon. With reports of shortages and healthcare facility closures, what measures should regional stakeholders, including Lebanon, take to alleviate the suffering of civilians?
What's happening with civilians happened in 1993, 1996, and 2006. So the Lebanese, they know very well if they do not fight back and be patient, the Israelis will continue until they occupy Lebanon as they did in 1982. The Lebanese government is doing efforts to circulate food and supplies among civilians. Hezbollah is doing so too. In addition, countries surrounding Lebanon are providing humanitarian aid. However, the displacement of people and carrying on the displacement will bring back the occupier. However, if they hold their ground, they might stand in the face of aggression.
Dr. Yassin, thank you so much for sharing your insights on this critical situation. The conflict in Gaza and Lebanon continues to pose immense challenges, and the road to peace remains fraught with uncertainty. Now, moving on to our second segment, with just over a week remaining until the U.S. presidential election on November 5th, both campaigns are making their final push, and voter turnout is set to be the key deciding factor. Will the last-minute efforts in the battleground states be enough to tip the scales in favor of either candidates, or are we headed for an unprecedentedly close election results?
We will build what I call an opportunity economy.
We will make America great.
We're ready to fight for it.
As one people, we are moving forward.
We will make America safe again.
According to The Economist's recent generic ballot surveys, they indicate increased Republican support, reducing the Democrats' chances of retaining the House majority from 61% to 54%. This shift points to a tighter race as Republicans gain momentum, though the House still remains more favorable for Democrats than other contests. While The Economist model takes multiple factors into account beyond polling data, the emerging trend suggests stronger competition for control of Congress. With both parties closely matched, Democrats now face a more challenging path to holding onto their majority. And we're joined by we're joined by Dr. Nouman Abu Isa, a member of the Democratic Party, to discuss the latest developments and the stakes as the campaigns make their final push. Dr. Nouman, Harris' campaign has been emphasizing social issues, especially abortion rights, to galvanize support. Her recent rally in Houston, where she was joined by prominent figures like Beyoncé, aimed at rallying women voters. How effective do you think this strategy is in reaching undecided voters or energizing the base in the final days?
Hello to all. First, I think women have been active supporters of Kamala Harris. They have been outraged about the recent restrictions on abortion laws in their states and in the United States in general, especially after Donald Trump appointed 3 social justices who overturned Roe versus Wade, and that took away the federal right to abortion. And the women feel that they have been violated. This is a decision between them and their doctors, and there is no room for the government to make those decisions. And Kamala Harris is capitalizing on the outrage of those women who are going to go to the voting places in droves, in large numbers. And it's clear that her margin with women is way above her opponent, Donald Trump. It's more than 60% of the women will be voting for her, and she is concentrating on that vote to tip her over the half point to win the presidency in the states which matter, basically those swing states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
Yes. Dr. Abu Isa, while younger voters continue to lean towards Harris, there is concerns about her declining support among the Latino voters, a group Trump seems to be gaining ground with. What factors might be contributing to this shift, and how can Harris address it before Election Day?
Yeah, the economy has been a big issue for most Americans, including minorities, and she is trying to address the inflation issue and also the help to the people who are suffering the most, the poor, including minorities like Latinos. She's been talking about child credit and also assistance to housing, like buying a first house. And those are the issues she's trying to explain to her audiences, that she feels their pain. She has been a poor person herself. She grew up with a single mother. She worked at McDonald's herself when she was young, and she knows the suffering of the poor Americans, and she is continuing to work with the current administration, and she has her own plans also for the next administration to satisfy the needs of those immigrants. Those immigrants should not be voting for Donald Trump because he wants to deport some of them. He wants to deport all illegal immigrants from the United States, even those who are working and have been born in this country. There are people, about 10 million people in the United States who are citizen in full capacity, but they don't have the paper to be residents in the United States. And she's trying to capitalize on those immigrants to try to gain back their support.
Now we're joined by Katie Labutin, a Republican Party advisor, along with Dr. Nouman Abu Isa. And Ms. Katie, if I may ask you, the latest polls show a neck-and-neck race between Trump and Harris, even in states that were previously leaning Democratic. What do you think is driving this surge in support for Trump, especially in key battlegrounds like Pennsylvania and Arizona?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on. I do want to caution that with the polls, everything right now is neck to neck, and this is very much a state-by-state election, so it is a little bit dangerous to look at it from a national perspective. That said, voters are finally getting to learn who Kamala Harris is. They're seeing what she's going to bring to the table if she's elected next month. They're seeing who her personality is. The fact that she's spending more time attacking the former president and having a difficult time separating herself from the Biden administration, saying that her administration will basically be a continuation of President Biden's administration. The message that she's giving is not assuaging voters' concerns that she's going to be any different from the status quo. And so voters who are still on the fence are more likely to go with the change that they know rather than the change they're unsure of. And that's why there's been some movement in the direction of the former president.
Right. If I may ask you here, Trump has made some bold proposals recently, such as eliminating income taxes in favor of tariffs. These were one of the bold announcements. How do you see this resonating with voters, particularly in economically struggling states like Michigan?
So it's one thing to come forth with these claims, and on the surface, it sounds like a great policy proposal to charge foreign nations to boost our economy. The United States Constitution gives the power of raising revenue for the federal government to Congress. So basically, this would be up to Congress, and if there's a Republican Congress elected in November, they would have the ability to potentially put these and then be able to raise revenue that way. We as Republicans, we believe in low taxes, low regulation, keeping the government as small as possible so that way it does what it needs to do. It doesn't have a surplus of revenue in its coffers. And so whether it's dealing with lower taxes, sales tax, or dealing with sales taxes or tariffs. The whole concept is just to reduce the tax burden on Americans, because the biggest issue right now is the economy. We're struggling. A lot of people in the middle class are still struggling to make ends meet. And so whatever we can do to make it easier for people to have a little bit of extra cash in their bank accounts at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive the message home at the end of the day. And that's what's going to win the election for the former president.
Well, Dr. Abu-Isa, tensions are high as the rhetoric from both sides intensifies. Now, Harris recently described Trump as a danger and threat to America. Do you think this kind of language helps to energize voters, or could it alienate those looking for a more positive messages?
Most voters would like to see more positive. They are sensitive to their livelihood, and they know what matters to them most, and they don't really care about name calling or putting down the other side. They are looking for real policies which affect them. Like we talk about the social policies of Kamala Harris, who are protective of women and of immigrants, and those are real issues to real people. People don't care about like you mentioned, a name calling or fight between former president and vice president, and those are unfortunate, but it's part of the political scene here. It's very acute competition between the two parties and the two persons, and those two persons are working 24/7 these days, just a week and a couple days before the election, and they are putting all their efforts toward the end date, and they are at the edge, and sometimes they get out of control, and they might say a few things like you mentioned. But the voters are very concerned about the future of this country. They are looking for policies which affect this country in a positive way. I mean, the Republicans like small governments, but we know that the deficit has been skyrocketing during the Trump administration, and there is more spending than there is revenues in this country, and that is a concern for most Americans.
Right. Ms. Katie, foreign interference has again become a topic of concern, with reports of Chinese hackers targeting both campaigns. How might this affect voters' confidence in the election process, and what measures should be taken to ensure election integrity?
So I think as far as the foreign interference aspect of it, that goes to more of a global level, and something that, whether we're talking elections or global Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 50 companies, that's something that just Americans and people in general have to just at the data privacy issue. As far as election security, the Secretaries of States and the government bodies responsible for election administration in each of the 50 states and the District of Columbia and the territories have put into place various systems that are focused on making sure that we have fair and free elections in all of our places, that it's easy and that your ballot is protected. We have safe measures in place. We have, and things like voter ID. A lot of times when you vote absentee, you have to have your ballot signed by a witness to ensure that you vote. And so just making sure that we follow through with these things. The number of cases of election interference are very small. They do happen, but it's on such a small scale that it doesn't affect the election the way it's believed to have affected the election in recent years.
Right. Dr. Abu-Isa, if I may here ask you, about what could be the decisive factors in these upcoming very few days, so as to put voters or change the polls into the direction of any of the two candidates?
Yeah, we have what we call voters get out the vote, basically trying to get out the Democratic voters to go to the polls and cast their ballots. Many Americans do not vote, and the Democratic Party is working hard to get out the vote by knocking on doors, reminding people by phone calls to start voting. Some of the states are the voting is open right now. Another important factor is really what's happening in the wars in the world, in the Middle East specifically, and that is impacting the vote of the Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. And Kamala Harris has been trying.
Right, very much indeed. I got your point here. Unfortunately, our time is out, and that was Katie Labutin and Dr. Nouman Abu Isa. Thank you so much for your insights. And as election day approaches, the race remains highly competitive, with both candidates working tirelessly to sway undecided voters and secure the electoral votes needed to win. Stay with In Focus for continued coverage as we follow the final days of this historic elections. That wraps up our episode today for In Focus. Remember to stay updated by following Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY for the latest developments. Many thanks for watching.